No one would sell the apartheid government weapons, spare parts, or even the blueprints to make their own. Most nations in that position would have simply gone without. South Africa did something different. It built an entire arms industry from scratch, in secret, under enormous pressure, and it built one that actually worked. The engine behind this effort was a state body called Armscor, short for the Armaments Corporation of South Africa. Armscor ran a network of more than 100 front companies scattered across the globe, each one quietly buying up technology, machine parts, and engineering know-how without ever revealing who the real customer was. By the late 1980s, this shadow industry employed around 160,000 people, close to 4% of the country's entire formal workforce, and it was turning out weapons that stood up against anything the rest of the world had. One of the clearest examples was the G5 Howitzer, a long-range artillery gun that could hit targets more than 30 kilometers away, a distance almost unheard of at the time. The man behind its extended-range shells was a Canadian-American engineer named Gerald Bull, who ran his ballistics research out of a lab straddling the Vermont-Quebec border. Bull was eventually arrested by American authorities and jailed for breaking the embargo. He kept working anyway, later selling his expertise to Saddam Hussein's Iraq, and was assassinated in Brussels years afterwards. That is the kind of murky, high-stakes world South Africa's weapons program grew out of. It was not a polished boardroom affair. It was smuggling, front companies, secret budgets, and brilliant, morally unbothered engineers doing whatever it took to get the job done. This was also the era that produced the Rooivalk attack helicopter, a project that began in 1984 under the Atlas Aircraft Corporation, the forerunner to what would become Denell's aviation wing. South African commanders fighting in the border war in Angola and Namibia needed a helicopter gunship capable of hunting Soviet-built tanks and escorting troop transports through hostile skies. Since nobody would sell them one, they built their own, using the airframe of an existing French-designed transport helicopter as a starting point. It would take until 1990 for the first prototype to fly, and until 2011 for the finished aircraft to reach full service. A strikingly long road for a country that badly needed the capability decades earlier. When apartheid ended and the arms embargo was formally dropped, South Africa found itself holding something unusual: a fully developed, homegrown weapons industry with almost nowhere to sell its products anymore, and a government that no longer needed to hide from the world. In April 1992, the country's leaders made a decision that would define the next 3 decades. They split Armscor in two. Armscor itself would stay on as the government's buying agency, purchasing weapons on behalf of the military. But its actual factories, laboratories, and design offices, along with more than 15,000 employees, were spun off into a brand new company called Denell. Denell inherited an extraordinary toolkit. It got the G5 and G6 howitzers, among the best artillery systems in the world. It got the Rooivalk program. It got missile systems like the Umkhonto air defense missile and the Makopa anti-tank missile. It got engineers who had spent a decade solving problems that better-funded countries had never even had to think about, because nobody had cut them off from the global market the way South Africa had been cut off. For a while, this paid off. A former Denell employee later described walking through the company's offices and seeing rooms the size of football fields, filled wall to wall with drawing boards and engineers. Denell signed a contract with the Finnish Navy in 2006 to supply the Umkhonto missile, its first serious sale to a Western nation, and it built up a genuine, if modest, export business selling to buyers across the Middle East, Africa, South America, and parts of Asia. Under the board that ran the company between 2011 and 2015, Denell reached the highest order book in its history, around 35 billion rand. But there was a warning sign buried inside Denell's own origin story, one that would matter enormously later. Unlike Armscor, Denell had never actually been designed as a lean commercial company. It was a sprawling, state-owned industrial group built for a war economy, organized into 5 separate divisions covering systems, manufacturing, aerospace, informatics, and property. It carried the weight and the culture of an apartheid-era military-industrial complex into a democratic South Africa that had very different priorities and, crucially, a much smaller defense budget. Denell was, in a sense, a giant built for a fight that had already ended. The question was never really whether it could still build good weapons. Clearly could. The question was whether the new South Africa could afford to keep feeding a company of that size, and whether the institutions meant to look after it could resist the temptation to raid it instead. If you want a single story that captures Denell's early post-apartheid struggles, look at what happened to the Rooivalk helicopter once it finally went looking for foreign buyers. By the time the aircraft was ready for the international market in the 1990s and 2000s, it was already fighting an uphill battle. Its avionics, while advanced when designed in the 1980s, had aged. It relied on French-made components, and the company that owned that technology, Airbus Helicopters, also made a rival helicopter, so there were real concerns that support for the Rooivalk's parts might not be reliable in the long run. On top of that, American diplomats reportedly pushed hard behind the scenes to steer potential buyers toward Boeing's Apache helicopter instead. Denell chased export deals anyway, courting Malaysia, the United Kingdom, and Australia, but the real test came in Turkey. In 2006 and 2007, Turkey ran a major tender for attack helicopters, and the Rooivalk made the shortlist against the Italian A129 Mangusta. South Africa lost. Turkey went with the Italians, partly because of established European partnerships and better offset manufacturing deals. In May 2007, Denell's chief executive announced the company was pulling the plug on further Rooivalk export development. It was a brutal moment. A genuinely capable helicopter, built at enormous cost and engineering effort, that the world's buyers simply would not touch. Denell had proven it could design world-class weapons. It had not proven it could sell them. This mattered because Denell, unlike a private defense contractor, could not simply absorb that kind of loss and move on. It was state-owned, and it depended heavily on government orders and government backing. When export ambitions failed, the company had far fewer places to turn. At the same time, a quieter, more corrosive problem was setting in. Denell's engineers, the very people who had built the G5, the Rooivalk, and the Umkhonto missile under sanctions and against the odds, were some of the most talented weapons designers on the planet. Once the doors to the rest of the world opened up, other countries noticed. Skilled engineers began drifting away to opportunities abroad, in the Gulf states, in Australia, wherever defense budgets were healthier and paychecks arrived on time. Every one of them who left took years of institutional knowledge with them, knowledge that is almost impossible to simply rebuild by hiring someone new. Denell limped through the 2000s and early 2010s in reasonably stable shape, buoyed by a functioning board, a real order book, and a defense industry that, while shrunken from its apartheid-era size, still had customers. Between 2011 and 2015, under a board later described by South Africa's own state corruption inquiry as competent and honest, the company actually grew. It expanded into new export markets and posted its best order book ever. Then, in 2015, everything changed, and not because of a helicopter tender or a competitor's better product. It changed because of politics. In September 2015, South Africa's Minister of Public Enterprises at the time, Lynn Brown, appointed a new board to run Denell, chaired by an attorney named Daniel Mantsha. According to South Africa's Judicial Commission of Inquiry into State Capture, led by Acting Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, this was not a routine appointment. It was, the commission found, a calculated move to install people at Denell who would go along with a scheme benefiting the politically connected Gupta family, close allies of then-President Jacob Zuma. The mechanism was a company called VR Laser, a longtime steel and armor plate supplier to Denell. In 2013, a Gupta associate named Salim Essa had bought a majority stake in VR Laser. The Zondo Commission later concluded, in blunt terms, that the Guptas had never intended to compete fairly for Denell's business. Instead, they used VR Laser as what the commission literally called a vehicle for capturing the company. Almost immediately after the new board took office, Denell's chief executive and two other senior executives, who had resisted pressure to favor VR Laser, were suspended on misconduct charges the commission later found to be manufactured. Zondo wrote that the entire episode looked engineered to remove people who would not go along with the plan. Once the resistors were gone, the irregular contracts followed. Between 2014 and 2016, VR Laser was awarded 3 major deals under what the commission described as suspicious circumstances, including a 10-year, single-source supply contract, even though Denell's own procurement staff had recommended a much shorter term and warned against skipping the normal competitive tender process. In one case, VR Laser's bid came in 100 million rand higher than a rival proposal from Denell's own subsidiary, yet still won. The most damaging move was a joint venture called Denel Asia, announced in January 2016, structured as a Hong Kong-based partnership in which Denel would hold 51% and VR Laser the rest. The plan would have effectively handed over Denel's intellectual property to a company with no established presence in Asia at all. National Treasury eventually blocked the deal, and Denel formally withdrew from it in 2017 after mounting public criticism. But the damage from the broader capture campaign was already done. South African officials later estimated that state capture wiped out roughly 3 billion rand in Denel revenue, and testimony to the Zondo Commission indicated that the company's revenue roughly halved by 2017 after years of steady growth beforehand. This is the part of Denel's story that a lot of outside observers miss. The company's collapse is often described as if it were simply about mismanagement, or falling defense budgets, or bad luck in export markets. Those things all played a role. But the deepest wound was self-inflicted, and it was political. A functioning, profitable, internationally competitive state company was deliberately hollowed out by people who had captured its leadership for private gain. Not because Denel's underlying engineering or its products had failed. The years since have been a story of the company trying, with limited success, to climb back out of the hole. Denel first reported insolvency in 2019, posting a loss of nearly 2 billion rand, and it soon began struggling to pay both suppliers and its own staff. In 2021, one of its divisions, Denel Land Systems, stopped paying salaries altogether, prompting a labor union to take the company to court and eventually seize its bank accounts to force a payout. The National Treasury has poured in billions of rand in bailouts over the years, including 3 billion rand around 2022 alone, and yet the company still lost out on major deals, including a roughly 6 billion rand missile contract with Egypt that collapsed when South African banks, citing ethical concerns tied to Denel's financial state, refused to extend the necessary loan guarantees. By the mid-2020s, the picture had become genuinely mixed, which is itself notable after so many years of straightforward decline. In April 2026, Denel's aeronautics division reported a real turnaround, posting an 18.7% revenue increase and a 178 million rand profit, more than double what had been budgeted, driven by better execution on maintenance contracts for the South African Air Force and a 5-year support deal for C-130 transport aircraft. Parliament's Defense Oversight Committees welcomed the news, while warning in the same breath that the wider Denel Group was still financially unstable, still leaking skilled engineers to better-paying employers overseas, and still operating under South Africa's Auditor General repeatedly refusing to sign off on its books. Elsewhere in the group, the picture is bleaker. Denel's ammunition arm, Pretoria Metal Pressings, once the company that supplied nearly half of all .303 rifle rounds used by Allied forces in the Second World War, has been so starved of investment that Denel is now actively seeking outside private investors just to modernize a single brass foundry, with bids due in August 2026. An American defense firm has been trying to strike an investment deal there for roughly 5 years without success. Trade unions, wary after so many broken promises, are demanding guarantees that any new turnaround plan actually pays workers on time before they will support it. What makes Denel's history worth telling is not just that a great company fell. It is that the fall did not follow the pattern people usually expect from failed state industries. Denel was not undone primarily by obsolete technology or incompetent engineers. South African-designed artillery, missiles, and armored vehicles are still respected internationally today. It was not undone primarily by a shrinking market either, since global defense spending has only grown in recent years. Denel was undone chiefly by a deliberate act of institutional sabotage, carried out for the private benefit of a handful of politically connected individuals, at a company that genuinely mattered to South Africa's sovereignty and its ability to defend itself without depending on foreign suppliers.